My future son-in-law kept asking about our family ranch 5 times in 5 visits. I thought he was just curious. At the rehearsal dinner, my daughter turned to me and whispered, "Mom, I need to tell you something." That morning, she'd slipped a folded note into my hand. 3 words, "Mom, help me." The next day, I stood in front of 120 wedding guests. I had 2 choices: cancel the wedding quietly or expose him in front of everyone. I chose justice. Thanks for tuning in. If stories about courage, family protection, and justice resonate with you, please like and subscribe. It helps us bring you more compelling narratives like this one. Comment below with your thoughts or where you're watching from. Disclaimer: while characters and settings are fictional creations for storytelling purposes, the themes of elder abuse awareness and family protection are unfortunately very real. My future son-in-law asked about the property line again. I caught it in the way he paused mid-sentence, coffee mug halfway to his lips, his eyes tracking past the kitchen window toward the tree line where our 185 acres ended. "Where exactly does your property stop, Carolyn?" His voice carried that easy casualness people use when they're trying to make a question sound like small talk. 5 times. 5 visits over 3 months, and every single time Blake found a way to ask about boundaries, where the land started, where it ended, what lay beyond that stand of pines. The first time I'd thought it was city boy curiosity. Denver natives don't always understand ranch life. But 30 years as a high school principal had taught me to recognize patterns, and Blake Harrison's pattern was starting to feel like a student circling the office before finally asking for something. "Just past those ponderosa pines," I said, keeping my tone light. "The creek marks the western edge." Blake nodded, his hazel eyes still fixed on the meadow. At 33, he looked like he'd stepped out of a financial services brochure, crisp polo shirt khakis that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill, a watch that caught the afternoon sunlight, handsome in that calculated way some men manage with dark hair professionally styled, and a smile that showed exactly the right amount of teeth. "Beautiful piece of land," he said. "Must be worth quite a bit this close to Kalispell." There it was, the question beneath the question. "It's home," I said simply. Rachel appeared from the hallway, my daughter, radiant in the way 30-somethings get when they're freshly engaged. She'd inherited her father's warm brown eyes and my stubborn chin, though at the moment that chin was lifted in Blake's defense. "Mom don't mind Blake. He's just interested in ranch life. You know how us city kids are." Us city kids. Rachel had grown up on this land, but 6 years in Denver working as a graphic designer had apparently erased her Montana roots. I smiled at my daughter, swallowing the unease that had been building in my chest like thunderclouds over the Swan Range. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe Blake really was just curious. Maybe the loneliness of 3 years as a widow had made me suspicious of any man who showed interest in my only child. But Philip's voice echoed in my memory, my husband gone 3 years now, taken by a heart attack while working on a client's foundation at 63. "Trust your gut, Carolyn," he used to say when I'd come home from the high school, frustrated by a student's odd behavior, especially about people. My gut was screaming now. "So wedding plans," Blake said, turning from the window with that practiced smile. "The caterer called. They need final numbers by Friday." We spent the next 20 minutes discussing seating charts and floral arrangements, Blake playing the role of attentive groom, while I played happy future mother-in-law. When they finally left Blake's Audi kicking up dust on the gravel drive, I stood at that same kitchen window staring at the tree line he'd been so interested in. The afternoon sun painted the Swan Range in shades of gold and purple. Somewhere in the meadow, a hawk called. This land had been Philip's dream, the place we'd built our lives. Now it felt like something Blake was measuring, calculating pricing. I walked to Philip's old desk in the study, surrounded by blueprints from the construction business he'd spent 40 years building. My hands were steadier than I expected as I pulled out my phone. Andrea had been Philip's attorney, then mine after he died. If anyone could help me figure out whether I was a paranoid old woman or a mother protecting her daughter, it was Andrea. I found her number, my thumb hovering over the call button. If I was wrong, Rachel would never forgive me for doubting the man she loved. But if I was right, The phone rang once before I could change my mind. That evening, I sat at Philip's old desk, surrounded by blueprints he'd never finish and tools he'd never touch again. 3 years, and I still couldn't bring myself to clear this space. His reading glasses sat exactly where he'd left them, next to a coffee mug that said, "World's Best Builder." I'd been about to call Andrea when something made me pause. I needed to think this through, needed to remember how we'd gotten here. Blake had arrived in our lives on Thanksgiving 6 months ago. Rachel had called the week before, breathless with new love. "Mom, I'm bringing someone home. His name is Blake. I think you're going to love him." I'd spent that Wednesday preparing turkey and pumpkin pie in a kitchen that felt too big for one person, wondering what kind of man had captured my daughter's attention. Rachel had been cautious about dating since her disaster 3 years ago, the boyfriend who'd borrowed money and disappeared. Blake Harrison had walked through my door that Thursday looking like he'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Confident handshake, warm smile, cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "Mrs. Caldwell, Rachel's told me so much about this place," he'd said, eyes sweeping across the great room. "It's beautiful. How long have you lived here?" 28 years. My husband and I bought it when Rachel was 2. "Your late husband," he'd said softly. "I'm sorry for your loss. Rachel says he was an incredible man." The meal had been pleasant. Blake complimented the turkey, asked thoughtful questions about my years as a principal, made Rachel laugh in a way I hadn't heard in years. For those few hours, I'd felt grateful. It was only when we'd moved to the porch for coffee, watching the November sun set behind the Swan Range, that he'd asked his first question. "This property must be special. How much land do you have out here?" "A bit over 180 acres. Philip and I bought it back in '96. "And now?" Blake's interest had seemed casual. "Now it's home." The months that followed moved with startling speed. By January, Blake had proposed at some trendy Denver restaurant. Rachel had called me at midnight sobbing with joy. 4 months seemed awfully fast, but I'd said all the right things. By February, they'd set a date, September 14th, right here at the ranch. Rachel wanted to marry where her mother's memory lived, where her father had built our life. But with each visit, Blake made helping plan the wedding, joining us for Sunday dinners, the questions came. Always about the land, the boundaries, what lay beyond our property line, the value of acreage this close to Kalispell. I'd noticed something else, too. The way his eyes would track across the room when he thought no one was watching, as if cataloging, calculating. The way he'd steer conversations toward finances, estate planning, long-term security. Investment advisor talk, Rachel had said. He can't help himself. But sitting at Philip's desk now, his blueprints spread before me, I realized I'd felt it from that first Thanksgiving. Something too calculated in Blake's charm, too practiced in his interest, too perfect. Philip would have seen it immediately. He'd always been better at reading people than I was, despite my 30 years wrangling teenagers. Trust your gut about people, he used to tell me, especially when they seem too good to be true. I looked at my phone again, Andrea's number still on the screen. This time I pressed call without hesitation. Andrea answered on the second ring, her voice carrying that sharp clarity that had made her the best estate attorney in Flathead Valley. "Carolyn, I was just thinking about you." Something in her tone steadied me. Andrea had handled Philip's estate after he died, navigating the complexities of his construction business and patents with patience I hadn't deserved in my grief-fogged state. More than that, she'd been Philip's friend. "I need to talk to you about Rachel's fiancé," I said. "It might be nothing. I might be... Tell me." I explained Blake's questions about our land, 5 visits, 5 different ways of asking where our property ended, how much acreage we owned, the way his eyes would catalog rooms, his too specific interest in estate planning and financial security. He asked again today. I finished. "Rachel thinks I'm being ridiculous. Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm just a paranoid widow who..." "Stop." Andrea's voice cut cleanly through my spiral. "How long did you work as a principal?" 30 years. "Why, and how many problems did you prevent by noticing small things, patterns?" I thought of students I'd helped, fights I'd stopped. Dozens, maybe more. Your instincts kept 800 kids safe every year for 3 decades. I'm not betting against them now." She shifted to business mode. "Tell me about Blake. What does he do?" Investment advisor in Denver. "Dating Rachel how long?" 6 months. Engaged in January. A pause. "That's fast." Relief flooded through me. Someone else had noticed. "I know." "Carolyn. I've practiced estate law for 25 years. The people most interested in managing elderly relatives' finances are often the ones who shouldn't be trusted with a checkbook. He's not managing my finances. He just asks questions. For now." Andrea's tone sharpened. "Let me look into this quietly. I have resources, background checks, professional networks. Give me 3 days." 3 days. To start. If Blake Harrison is exactly who he says he is, we'll know and you can relax. But if there's something else," she trailed off meaningfully, "Rachel will never forgive me if I'm wrong. Would you rather ask forgiveness or watch your daughter marry a man who's after your land?" Pure Andrea bluntness. "We're just doing due diligence. Any good parent would do the same. What if you find something?" "Then we deal with it. Together. You're not alone in this. Philip would want someone watching out for both of you." Philip's name brought unexpected tears. Andrea had been at his funeral, had held my hand through probate, had known him as client and friend. "Okay," I said. "Look into him. I'll call you Wednesday. Meanwhile, don't sign anything Blake suggests. Don't give him financial documents and act normal." "That's all. That's everything. And Carolyn, trust yourself. You've earned that right." After we hung up, I sat in Philip's study, silence pressing against my ears. 3 days felt like forever. I pulled open the bottom drawer where I'd filed important documents after Philip died. The property deed sat on top. I unfolded it carefully, running my fingers over the legal description. Purchased 1996. Purchase price $95,000. I'd never really thought about what it might be worth now. We'd bought it for the space, the mountains, the dream of raising Rachel somewhere free. But Denver had been sprawling outward for years, and Kalispell was no longer the sleepy town we'd found. The numbers stared up at me from the page 95,000 in 96. What would 185 acres be worth today this close to town, with the Swan Range rising beyond our meadow? If Blake was asking questions, maybe I needed to know the answers. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of Philip's study, his leather chair still molded to his shape after 3 years. The desk lamp threw shadows across blueprints he'd never finish. This room was the last place Philip had been fully alive. The property deed lay open before me. Parcel 185 acres. Purchase date April 1996. Purchase price $95,000. We'd saved for years to afford it. Back then, it was scrubland an hour from anywhere. Philip had seen the potential. "Land appreciates," he'd said. "We're buying Montana itself." He'd been right. Flathead Valley had transformed as Denver sprawled north. The realtor who'd called last year estimated our property at $5.2 million. But the ranch was only part of Philip's legacy. I pulled out the estate folder Andrea had prepared, flipping to the asset summary. The numbers came into focus with frightening clarity. Total estate value $9.5 million. The ranch accounted for 5.2. The rest came from 40 years of Philip's work. He'd sold his construction company 2 years before he died for $1.8 million. His Patents Foundation Innovations contractor, still used, brought in $150,000 yearly. His investment portfolio held $2.5 million. Life insurance added $500,000. My income from pension and royalties totaled about $300,000 annually. I lived on $50,000. The rest accumulated. We'd never lived like we had money. Philip drove the same truck for 15 years. I wore the same coat a decade. Rachel grew up in thrift stores, never wanting, but never wasteful. Money changes people, Philip used to say after witnessing families torn apart over inheritance. His own brother hadn't spoken to him for 5 years over $80,000. The moment people know you have it, they start calculating. Better to fly under the radar. So we had. Old truck, practical clothes, no vacations, just the land and the life we'd built. Philip had started as a carpenter's apprentice at 18. We'd met when he was 26, building an addition on my school. He'd proposed 6 months later with a ring he'd made himself. "I'm going to build you a life," he'd promised. And he had. Not for wealth's sake, but because he loved creating something lasting. The heart attack took him at 63 while laying foundation for a client's house. I'd found him in his truck in our driveway, gone before the ambulance arrived. 3 years, and I still reached for him some mornings. After he died, Andrea helped structure trusts protecting Rachel. No spouse could access Philip's estate without Rachel's explicit consent, a lesson from his brother's divorce. Her inheritance would be hers alone. I'd never told Rachel the exact numbers. She knew we owned the ranch, knew I was comfortable, but $9.5 million she'd insist I sell move somewhere smaller. She didn't understand this land wasn't about money. It was Philip's dream. Now Blake was circling, and he had no idea what he was really circling. County records showed our acreage maybe estimating $3 or $4 million. But the business sale patents investments, those were private. Our modest lifestyle hid the rest, just as Philip had intended. The phone rang Wednesday morning while I was having coffee on the porch, 3 days as Andrea had promised. Carolyn. Her voice carried weight I'd only heard once before when Philip's will was contested. "Can you come to my office this morning? This isn't something we should discuss over the phone." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. "You found something?" "I found several things." A pause. "How soon can you get here?" I looked out at the meadow, the mountains, the 185 acres Philip had chosen for us. "I'm on my way." Andrea's office smelled like old leather and fresh coffee. The folder she slid across her desk was thick enough to make my heart stop. She'd closed the door, drawn the blinds, things she only did for sensitive cases. Her expression was the one that meant bad news. "Blake has done this before," she said without preamble. "Twice that I can confirm." The room tilted. I gripped the desk edge. Andrea opened the folder, revealing photographs clipped to documents. Jennifer Fletcher, 28, daughter of a tech CEO in Seattle. Blake dated her 5 months in 2022. Got engaged that spring. She pushed a photo toward me, a young woman laughing at a restaurant, Blake's arm around her shoulders. Same charming smile he'd given Rachel. The engagement ended 2 weeks after Blake attended a family meeting about the Fletcher estate. Jennifer's mother had died the year before. Blake asked very specific questions about property transfers, inheritance structures. Andrea tapped the document. 2 weeks later, he disappeared. No explanation, no forwarding address. The family paid him $200,000 to go away quietly and sign an NDA. Easier than publicity or court battles. My hands shook. "You said twice." Andrea pulled another photograph. Nicole Bradford, 29, daughter of a real estate developer in Denver. Blake dated her 4 months in 2023, engaged in August. This woman had lighter hair, a softer smile, the same hopeful look Rachel got around Blake. Same pattern. Identical. Nicole's mother has advanced Alzheimer's. Her father was updating his estate plan. Blake proposed right before a family financial meeting. 3 weeks later, gone. The Bradford family paid $300,000. Andrea leaned forward. Nicole's father's attorney contacted me off the record when I started asking questions. He wanted to warn us. 2 women, 2 families. Same man, same smile. These families don't sue because they can't prove intent, Andrea continued. Blake never touched money directly. He just asked questions, attended meetings, gathered information, then left. Breaking an engagement isn't a crime. He's a professional. Yes. Andrea's voice softened. And Carolyn Jennifer's mother had died. Nicole's mother was incapacitated. Blake targets women whose mothers are gone or unavailable. Women without that maternal protection. Rachel lost Philip 3 years ago. Blake saw vulnerability. Both families had significant wealth, but modest lifestyles, Andrea said. Fletcher money was in company stock, not flashy cars. Bradford wealth in commercial properties, not personal luxury. Blake does his research, like Philip's choice to fly under the radar. County records show your 185 acres, Andrea continued, Blake could estimate several million. But he doesn't know about Philip's patents, the business sale, your actual worth. He thinks he's found a comfortable widow with valuable land. Rachel's been engaged 4 months, I said. These others lasted 4 to 5 months. You're near his typical endpoint, except there's a wedding planned. That gives him legal access to assets. This might be his biggest score. I thought of Rachel planning flowers, tasting cake, believing in love. What do? We need someone who can dig deeper. Track Blake beyond public records, find other victims, discover who he really is. Andrea pulled a business card from her desk. Marcus Webb, private investigator, former law enforcement. 15 years experience. He's expensive, but the best. Discreet, thorough, he finds things people don't want found. I didn't hesitate. Hire him. Carolyn, his retainer, is, I don't care what it costs. My voice came out hard. I need to know who my daughter is marrying. Everything. Can he start today? Andrea smiled slightly. I'll call him now. She reached for her phone, and I looked at the photographs of Jennifer and Nicole. 2 women who'd loved Blake Harrison. 2 families who'd paid him to disappear. Rachel wasn't going to be the third. Marcus arrived on a Tuesday morning in a sedan so unremarkable, I forgot the color the moment it pulled away from the house. That I realized was exactly the point. He was maybe mid-50s with the kind of stillness that came from years of watching people who didn't want to be watched. When he shook my hand, his grip was firm but not performative, the handshake of someone who'd spent decades in law enforcement and had nothing left to prove. Mrs. Caldwell, he said. His voice was Montana flat, no flourishes. Andrea spoke highly of you. She spoke highly of you too, I replied, leading him inside, though she mostly emphasized the word thorough. A faint smile. That's accurate. We started in the kitchen where Blake had stood 5 times asking about property lines. Marcus moved through the space like he was reading it. Sight lines, traffic patterns, places someone might linger if they were trying to seem casual. This is where most of your conversations happen, he asked. Yes, coffee, breakfast, dinners when Rachel's here. I gestured toward the window. He always stood right there, looking out at the land. Marcus nodded, pulled a small black case from his jacket. I'm going to install 3 cameras. Kitchen, living room, front entry. They're motion-activated, encrypted, and completely legal under Montana law. Andrea already confirmed it with a judge. I watched as he worked. The camera in the kitchen went behind a mason jar on the top shelf, the lens no bigger than a shirt button. In the living room, it disappeared into the bookshelf between 2 of Philip's old carpentry manuals. The one by the front door hid inside a smoke detector. You won't see them, Marcus said, but they'll see everything. What exactly are we looking for? I asked. Behavioral patterns. Who he talks to when you're not around. What he does when he thinks no one's watching. He closed the case, met my eyes. People show you who they are when they think they're alone. That's when the mask slips. I thought of Blake's charm, his 2 perfect answers, the way he always seemed to know exactly what to say. How long will this take? 48 hours for preliminary findings. After that, I'll need to dig deeper into his background, financial records, employment history, previous addresses. He paused. Andrea mentioned 2 prior cases. That's a pattern. Patterns have sources, and sources have names, I said quietly. Exactly. We walked the property after that. Marcus asked about fencing, access, roads, neighbors. He took notes in a small leather notebook, the kind Philip used to carry in his shirt pocket when he was planning a build. The similarity made my chest tighten. You're protecting your daughter, Marcus said as we stood near the barn. The Swan Range rose behind us, snow caps bright against the August sky. That's not paranoia, that's good parenting. Everyone keeps telling me that, I said, but it doesn't make it easier. It's not supposed to be easy. He tucked the notebook away, but it's supposed to be done. The cost was steep. Andrea hadn't lied about that. But I'd spent 30 years protecting 800 kids a year. I wasn't about to stop now for the one who mattered most. When do we start? I asked. We already have, Marcus said. Cameras go live tonight. I'll monitor remotely, flag anything that stands out. He handed me a card with a single phone number. You see something, you call. Day or night? I slipped the card into my pocket. 48 hours. 48 hours, he confirmed. 2 days later, Marcus was back at my kitchen table. This time he'd brought files, printouts, screenshots, pages of notes in that same tight handwriting. He didn't waste time. Blake Harrison is a fake name. The words landed like a stone in still water. I felt the ripples spread through my chest, my hands the space behind my eyes. What? Marcus slid a page across the table. A driver's license, Washington State, issued 2021. The face was Blake's. The name wasn't. His real name is Brian Edward Whitmore, Marcus said, and he has a warrant out of Nevada for fraud. Marcus spread the documents across my kitchen table, and the blood in my veins turned to ice. Brian Edward Whitmore, he said, tapping a mug shot from 2019. The face was Blake's, but younger, harder. Arrested in Nevada for investment fraud. Posted $250,000 in bail, then disappeared before trial. How did he become Blake Harrison? I asked. Legal name change 2019. Filed in Oregon. Marcus pulled out another page. Except he had an active warrant when he did it. He'd planned everything. There's more, Marcus said quietly, and you're not going to like it. I found the boxes in Philip's garage files gathering dust for 3 years. Inside the box marked 2008, Contracts and Litigation, was a folder, Whitmore Construction, Bankruptcy. The first page showed a photograph, a man in his 50s, face twisted in anger, standing before a half-finished building. The caption read, Brian Whitmore, Senior Owner, Whitmore Construction, LLC. Philip never mentioned him by name, I said, flipping through court filings and creditor claims. But I remember this. A company tried to undercut Philip on a big commercial project in Missoula. They lost the bid, then went under. 2008, Marcus said. Market crash didn't help. Whitmore Construction had been hemorrhaging money for years. When they lost the Missoula contract to Philip's company, it was the final blow. Then I found the obituary. Brian Whitmore Sr., 52, of Kalispell, Montana, passed away on March 14, 2010. The words died by suicide weren't printed, but I knew. He left a note, Marcus said, handing me a photocopy. Public record. The handwriting was jagged, furious. Philip Caldwell destroyed my business. He destroyed my life. I hope he rots in hell for what he's done to my family. I couldn't breathe. Philip didn't destroy him, I said. He just won a contract. That's business. I know, Marcus said gently, but grief doesn't care about fairness. And a 17-year-old kid losing his father. That kind of anger doesn't just go away. 17. Marcus showed me a high school yearbook page, 2009. Brian E. Whitmore Sr. The face was Blake's. Younger, thinner, unmistakable. He watched his father fall apart, then die, Marcus said, and he blamed Philip. Even after your husband passed, the anger stayed. It just found a new target. Rachel. I thought of Thanksgiving, of Blake asking about the land, the business, the things Philip had built. I thought he was curious. He'd been cataloging. He's not after the money, I said. No. Marcus closed the file. He's after revenge. He wants to destroy what Philip built, the legacy, the land, the family. And he's willing to use Rachel to do it. The room felt smaller. I thought of Rachel's smile, her excitement about the wedding, the way she'd defended Blake when I'd raised concerns. She had no idea she was a weapon. What do we do? I asked. We stop him, but we have to be smart. If he knows we're onto him, he'll disappear just like Nevada. And Rachel will never believe us without proof. Then we get proof. We already have some. Marcus tapped the files, but we need more. We need to catch him in the act. The cameras, I said. The cameras are a start. Marcus stood. But Carolyn, you need to understand something. Brian Whitmore spent 14 years planning this. He's not going to stop because we ask nicely. I looked at the photo of Whitmore Sr. at the rage in his eyes and thought of his son carrying that rage for more than a decade. He's not just targeting my money, I said. He wants to ruin everything Philip stood for, and he's willing to destroy Rachel to do it. Yes, Marcus said, which is why we can't let him. My phone rang at 8 o'clock that night just as I was trying to process everything Marcus had revealed. When Dr. Bennett's name appeared on the screen, my stomach twisted. Doctors didn't call after hours unless something was wrong. Carolyn, she sounded careful. I'm calling as your physician, but also as someone who... I need to tell you something. It's about Blake. I sank into Philip's chair. What about him? He came to see me Monday, August 5th. She paused. He said he was concerned about you. Monday was the day before Marcus arrived, before I'd even confirmed Blake's real identity. Concerned about what? He said you'd been forgetting things, repeating yourself, getting confused. Her voice hardened. Carolyn, I've been your doctor for 8 years. You don't have memory problems. So why would he say I did? That's what worried me. Papers rustled. He asked very specific questions. What are the early signs of dementia? What medications affect judgment? How do you determine if someone is mentally incompetent? The room tilted. He asked about sedatives, she continued. Benzodiazepines, Ambien specifically. Dosages, side effects, how long they stay in someone's system. She exhaled. Carolyn, he wasn't asking as a concerned family member. He was researching. I thought of Blake in my kitchen offering to make coffee, pouring tea, always so helpful. You think he was planning to drug me, I said. I think he was planning to make you look incompetent. Laura's voice shook. Wayne, if you appeared confused, forgetful, unable to make decisions, he could petition for medical power of attorney. Control your finances, your property, everything. Could he do that? With the right documentation and a compliant doctor. Yes, I've seen it before. She paused. My mother was a victim of elder abuse, financial and medical. It's why I went into family practice, and it's why I'm calling you now. I closed my eyes, seeing Blake smile, his charm, the way he'd inserted himself into our lives. What do I do? First, don't sign anything he gives you. No medical power of attorney, nothing. If he pushes, tell him you want your lawyer present. I have a lawyer. Good. Second, be careful about food and drink when he's around. Don't leave drinks unattended. If something tastes off, don't finish it. I thought of the coffee I'd poured out last week because it had tasted bitter. I'd blame the beans. Ambien is tasteless in hot liquids, Laura said. 20 milligrams would make you drowsy, confused, unsteady. If someone documented that repeatedly, especially on video... The cameras. Marcus had installed cameras. Thank you, I whispered, for calling, for risking... You protected kids for 30 years, Laura interrupted. Someone needs to protect you. After she hung up, I sat in the dark study staring at the glass of water on Philip's desk. I'd poured it an hour ago before Marcus left. I didn't touch it. Instead, I thought about every time Blake had been in this house, every offer of coffee, tea, water, the way he'd insisted on helping in the kitchen, always near the drinks, always thoughtful. He'd been testing, preparing. He wasn't just trying to steal my money or destroy Philip's legacy. He was willing to poison me to do it. I texted Marcus. We need to talk. Tomorrow. Early. His response came immediately. Already on it. Don't eat or drink anything Blake touches. We're going to catch him. I looked at the water glass again, then poured it down the sink. Blake Harrison, Brian Whitmore had spent 14 years planning revenge, but he'd made one mistake. He'd underestimated a mother's instinct and a doctor's oath. And now we were ready. The 3 weeks between Dr. Bennett's warning and setting the trap felt like holding my breath underwater. We met in Andrea's office on August 15th, me, Andrea, Marcus, and Dr. Bennett. It felt surreal, like assembling a team for something out of a crime show. Except this wasn't fiction. This was my life, my daughter, my home. We need video evidence, Marcus said, spreading photos of my kitchen across the conference table. Catching him in the act is the only way to make charges stick. What about the cameras you already installed? I asked. They're good, but not good enough. He pointed to blind spots. I need to upgrade. Better angles audio recording. If he says anything incriminating, we'll have it. Dr. Bennett leaned forward. Carolyn, you cannot drink anything he prepares, not even a sip. We need the full sample for lab testing. How do we get him to try? Andrea asked. Marcus tapped the kitchen photo. We create an opportunity. Carolyn invites him for dinner, acts normal. Then she leaves a drink unattended, pretends to take a phone call, checks something in another room. If he's planning to drug her, he'll take the chance. My stomach twisted. And if he doesn't, then we try again, Marcus said simply. But based on his research with Dr. Bennett, he's ready to move. The wedding's in a month. Time's running out for him. Andrea made notes. Once we have the sample, I'll ensure chain of custody. Dr. Bennett tests it, documents the findings. If there's Ambien or anything else, we go to the sheriff. Sheriff Bennett, Dr. Bennett added. No relation, but he's solid. I've worked with him on elder abuse cases before. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus upgraded the cameras. I watched him work, marveling at how invisible they were behind the clock, inside the smoke detector tucked into the bookshelf. He won't see them, Marcus assured me, and the audio's crystal clear. The hardest part was acting normal. Blake came by twice during those weeks, each time offering to help, to make coffee, to pour wine with dinner when Rachel was there. Each time I smiled and declined, my heart hammering against my ribs. Rachel noticed I was tense. Mom, are you okay? You've been weird lately. Just wedding stress. I lied, hating myself for it. I want everything to be perfect for you. She hugged me and I held on tight, thinking about what Blake intended to steal from her. Not just money, her mother, her sense of safety, her trust in love itself. We set the date for September 4th, 10 days before the wedding. Close enough that Blake would be desperate, far enough that we could act on the evidence before the ceremony. You sure you want to do this? Andrea asked the day before. I thought of Philip, of the life we'd built, of Rachel's future. I'm sure. That evening, I called Blake, kept my voice light casual. Rachel mentioned you're in town tomorrow. Would you like to come by for dinner, just the two of us? I feel like we haven't really talked much, and I'd love to get to know my future son-in-law better. He agreed immediately, too quickly. Perfect. I said, my hand shaking as I hung up. 6 o'clock. September 4th arrived with a sky so blue it hurt. I spent the day cooking Philip's favorite pot roast, the recipe I could make in my sleep. My hands moved through familiar motions while my mind raced through the plan. Marcus texted at 5:30 in position. Vans parked down the road. Cameras check. Dr. Bennett lab standing by. You've got this. Andrea, legal team ready. Be safe. At 6 o'clock, Blake's car pulled into the driveway. I watched through the window as he got out holding a bouquet of flowers. The perfect son-in-law, the perfect predator. My phone buzzed. Marcus cameras rolling. Good luck. I opened the door with a smile I didn't feel. Blake, I said. Come in. Blake arrived at 6 with that rehearsed smile I'd once mistaken for charm. Carolyn, he said, handing me flowers. Thank you for inviting me. I led him to the dining room where Philip's pot roast waited. The meal I'd cooked 1,000 times, the one that used to mean family and safety. Tonight it was bait. We talked about the wedding. Seating charts, timelines, whether the ceremony should be at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Blake played his role perfectly, the attentive fiancé, the grateful son-in-law. Then, as I'd known he would, he circled back. Have you given any more thought to estate planning? He asked, cutting his meat with precise movements. Rachel mentioned you haven't updated anything since Philip passed. I'd be happy to help coordinate that. I work with excellent estate attorneys in Denver. Andrea handles everything, I said, keeping my voice light. But thank you. His smile didn't waver, but something flickered behind his eyes. Impatience. At 7:15, I stood abruptly, pressing my hand to my temple. I'm sorry, I have a terrible headache. Must be the stress of wedding planning. I moved to the kitchen, filled a glass with water from the tap, and set it on the counter. I'm going to lie down for a few minutes. Please finish your dinner. Are you sure? Can I get you anything? No, I just need to rest. I walked toward the stairs, each step deliberate, and climbed slowly until I was out of sight. Then I crept into the upstairs hallway and opened the tablet Marcus had given me. The screen showed 3 camera angles of the kitchen in perfect clarity. Blake was alone. For 5 seconds, he didn't move. Then he stood, walked to the base of the stairs, and listened, confirming I was gone. He returned to the kitchen, glanced around, reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small prescription bottle. My hands shook as I watched. He moved efficiently like he'd practiced. Opened the bottle, shook 1 pill into his palm. Found a spoon in the drawer, not the one I'd used, a clean one from the back. Placed the pill on the counter and crushed it with the back of the spoon, grinding it into fine powder. Then he picked up my water glass. I watched him pour the powder in, every grain disappearing into the clear liquid. He stirred it with the same spoon, tapping the edge against the glass to make sure nothing stuck. Wiped the spoon with a paper towel, put it in the sink. Returned the bottle to his pocket. 47 seconds start to finish. He arranged himself back at the table just as I started down the stairs, making my footsteps audible. "Feeling better?" he asked when I appeared. "A little." I moved toward the kitchen, reaching for the glass. "Here," Blake said, standing quickly. He picked up the water and brought it to me, his smile warm and concerned. "Drink this. Hydration helps with headaches." I took the glass from his hand, our fingers touching briefly. His eyes watched me with an intensity that might have seemed like care. It was hunger. "Thank you," I said. Then my phone, programmed to ring at exactly this moment, buzzed on the counter. "Oh, excuse me. It's Rachel." I turned away, pretending to answer. With my back to Blake, I grabbed a dish towel from the counter, wrapped it carefully around the glass, preserving his fingerprints on the smooth surface, and poured the water down the sink. The towel stayed between my hand and the glass the entire time. Marcus had been specific about this: don't contaminate the evidence. His prints on that glass are part of the chain of custody. I set the glass in the sink, still wrapped in the towel, and turned back to Blake. When I faced him again, the empty glass in the sink, he was watching me. For just a second less than a heartbeat, his expression went cold, flat, the mask slipping. Then it was back, the smile, the warmth, the concern. "I should go," he said. "Let you rest. Big day coming up." "Yes," I managed. "Thank you for coming." I walked him to the door, watched his taillights disappear down the drive. Only then did I let myself shake. Marcus was inside 30 seconds later, gloves on evidence bags ready. He collected the glass from the sink, the spoon, even the paper towel Blake had used. Every surface Blake had touched. "We got it," Marcus said quietly, holding up his phone. The video played in perfect clarity. Blake crushing the pill, pouring the powder, stirring my water. All of it. I couldn't speak, could only nod. The next morning, Dr. Bennett called with the lab results. "Zolpidem," she said, her voice tight. "Trade name Ambien, 20 milligrams, double the standard dose." She paused. "Carolyn, in someone your age, this could cause severe confusion, loss of coordination, even unconsciousness. If you'd been alone, if something had happened—" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. "But we have proof," I said. "Yes," Dr. Bennett confirmed. "Undeniable, documented proof. He tried to poison you." I looked out the window at the land Philip had loved, the legacy Blake had tried to destroy. "Now," I said, "we stop him." The final week before the wedding felt like acting in a play where only I knew the real script. We met in Andrea's office on September 9th, me, Andrea, Marcus, Dr. Bennett, and Sheriff Thomas Bennett. The video played on the conference room screen one more time. Blake crushing the pill, Blake stirring poison into my water, Blake smiling as he handed me the glass. "We have enough to arrest him now," Sheriff Bennett said. "Attempted poisoning fraud, the Nevada warrant. I can pick him up tonight." "No," I said. Everyone turned to look at me. "We expose him at the wedding." "Carolyn," Andrea started. "Hear me out." I leaned forward. "If we arrest him quietly, Rachel will always wonder if we were wrong. If we made a mistake, she'll defend him, maybe even blame me." My voice steadied. "But if it happens publicly with witnesses, if she sees the evidence herself, she'll know the truth. And Blake won't be able to disappear this time. Marcus nodded slowly. It also puts him in a position where he can't run. He'll be surrounded. Sheriff Bennett looked at Dr. Bennett, who'd been quiet. Laura? Rachel deserves to see who he really is, she said, and she deserves to make that choice herself with all the facts. All right, the sheriff said. We do it at the wedding. I'll be there in plain clothes. Marcus on the perimeter. Andrea, you'll have the legal documentation. Everything. Andrea confirmed, including affidavits from Jennifer Fletcher and Nicole Bradford. They've agreed to come forward now that there's hard evidence. I exhaled slowly. Thank you, all of you. The wedding preparations continued like nothing was wrong. A white tent went up on the lawn where Philip used to build things. Chairs arranged in perfect rows. Flowers everywhere, wildflowers from the mountains, Rachel's favorite. Blake came by every day playing the devoted groom. He helped move tables, charm the caterers, asked thoughtful questions about the timeline. I smiled and played the happy mother-in-law, and every night I collapsed into bed, exhausted from the performance. On September 11th, Dominic arrived. My best man, Blake, introduced him at dinner. My brother. Brother. Not accomplice, not co-conspirator, brother. Dominic had the same easy charm, the same practiced smile. He shook my hand and called me Mom, and I wanted to scream. Marcus texted that night, Dominic Whitmore, confirmed. He was with Blake in Nevada, accomplice. So there would be 2 arrests at the wedding. On Wednesday afternoon, I drove to the cemetery. Philip's headstone was simple granite the way he'd wanted. Philip James Caldwell. 1960, 2021. Builder. Husband. Father. I sat on the grass beside him the way I used to sit on our porch when he'd work late into the evening. I wish you were here, I said quietly. You'd know exactly what to do. You always did. The wind moved through the pines, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice. You already know what to do, Carolyn. You've always been the strong one. I'm protecting what you built, I whispered. The land, the legacy, Rachel. I won't let him destroy it. I won't let him hurt our daughter. The mountains rose beyond the cemetery, snowcaps catching the afternoon sun. Philip had loved this view. He'd said once that Montana taught you what mattered: family, land, honest work. Blake, Harrison, Brian Whitmore had understood none of those things. But I did, and so did everyone helping me stop him. Friday night was the rehearsal dinner at a restaurant in Whitefish. Rachel was there with Blake, both of them glowing and perfect. Except Rachel kept checking her phone, staring into space, losing track of conversations mid-sentence. You okay, honey? I asked when Blake stepped away. She looked at me and something flickered in her eyes. Fear, doubt. I'm fine, she said quickly. Just wedding jitters. But her hand shook as she lifted her water glass, and when Blake returned, she flinched slightly before smiling. I watched her the rest of the night, my heart sinking. Rachel knew something was wrong. The question was, what did she know? And when had she figured it out? The wedding morning dawned, with the kind of blue Montana sky that made you believe in new beginnings. I stood behind Rachel in her childhood bedroom, fastening the tiny buttons on her wedding dress. My hands were steady, even though my heart was hammering. In a few hours, everything would change. Mom, Rachel said suddenly, her voice breaking. I met her eyes in the mirror. They were filled with terror. I need to tell you something. She turned to face me, the white silk rustling. Her hands shook as she reached into the pocket hidden in the dress folds and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She pressed it into my palm. I opened it. 3 words in her handwriting, Mom, help me. Rachel. Thursday night, she said, the words tumbling out. I wanted to surprise Blake at his hotel. I thought we could have dinner before the rehearsal. Her breath hitched. I got to his room and the door was cracked open. I heard voices, Blake and Dominic. My blood turned cold. I stood there listening. Tears streaked down her face, ruining her makeup. Mom, I heard everything. The plan to drug you, to make you seem incompetent so he could control your finances. He said I'd never suspect anything because I trusted him. And then Dominic said something about revenge on Philip Caldwell, and Blake laughed. She covered her mouth, sobbing. He laughed about destroying our family. I pulled her into my arms, careful of the dress, and held her while she shook. I didn't want to believe it, she whispered against my shoulder. I spent all day yesterday telling myself I'd misheard that there was some explanation. But Mom, I know what I heard. I can't marry him. I can't. I know, sweetheart, I said quietly. I know. She pulled back, staring at me. What? I've known for weeks. I smoothed her hair the way I used to when she was small and frightened. I've been investigating him. His real name is Brian Whitmore. He's wanted in Nevada for fraud. He tried to poison me 4 days ago and we caught him on camera. Rachel's legs buckled. I helped her sit on the bed, the white dress pooling around her. You knew, she whispered, all this time. I was trying to protect you, I said. I didn't want you to know until I had undeniable proof, until I could show you who he really was. And I was trying to protect you. She laughed a broken sound. We were both protecting each other. That's what mothers and daughters do. She looked at the note in my hand, then at me. Oh, what do we do now? Call it off. Tell everyone to go home. I knelt in front of her, took her hands. No, we expose him, publicly, with witnesses. So he can't run, can't lie his way out of it, can't hurt anyone else the way he hurt Jennifer Fletcher and Nicole Bradford. There were others. 2 before you, maybe more. I squeezed her hands. But you're going to be the one who stops him. We both are. Rachel's jaw set the fear in her eyes, hardening into something else. Determination. She was Philip's daughter after all. How you walk down that aisle, I said. I'll stop the ceremony when the officiant asks if anyone objects, and then we tell everyone exactly who Brian Whitmore is and what he tried to do. She nodded slowly. In front of everyone. In front of 120 witnesses, including the sheriff. The sheriff's here. Sweetheart, I've had a team working on this for weeks. We have video evidence, lab results, legal documentation, everything. I stood helping her up. All we need now is you. Are you strong enough to do this? Rachel wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and looked at herself in the mirror. Behind the smeared mascara, I saw the woman she'd become strong, smart, capable. She'd figured it out herself 2 days ago, and she'd carried that terrible knowledge alone because she thought she was protecting me, just like I'd carried it alone to protect her. I'm ready, she said. At 2:45, we stood at the edge of the lawn where Philip used to build things. The white tent glowed in the afternoon sun. 120 guests sat in neat rows, murmuring and smiling. Blake stood at the altar in his perfect suit, Dominic beside him. Both of them the picture of charm and success. Rachel slipped her arm through mine. The bouquet of wildflowers trembled slightly in her other hand. Ready, sweetheart, I whispered. She looked at me, squeezed my arm, and smiled a fierce, determined smile. Ready, Mom. The music began, and we walked forward together. The string quartet played Pachelbel's Canon as I walked Rachel down the aisle between the rows of white chairs, each step feeling like walking toward the edge of a cliff. 120 faces turned toward us, smiling. The flower arch at the altar framed Blake and Dominic perfectly against the backdrop of the Swan Range. The Montana sky stretched endless and blue above the white tent. Everything looked exactly as a wedding should, beautiful, hopeful, full of promise. Everything was a lie. I scanned the crowd as we walked. Sheriff Bennett sat in the 3rd row looking like any other guest in his suit. Dr. Bennett was in the front, her medical bag discreetly tucked under her chair. Andrea sat near the aisle, a leather portfolio on her lap. And somewhere in the perimeter, Marcus watched from the shadows. We reached the altar. Blake's smile was radiant as he took Rachel's hand. I saw Dominic shift slightly, the best man playing his role. Dearly beloved, the officiant began his voice carrying across the lawn. We are gathered here today to witness the union of Rachel Marie Caldwell and Blake Jonathan Harrison in holy matrimony. I sat in the front row, my hands folded in my lap, and waited. The officiant continued through the traditional words, love and honor, sickness and health, for better or worse. Each phrase felt like sandpaper against my nerves. Then finally, if anyone here knows of any lawful reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever. Hold your peace. I stood. The movement was deliberate, loud in the expectant silence. 120 pairs of eyes swiveled toward me. Stop, I said, my voice clear and strong. Stop this ceremony. The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers. Blake's smile faltered for just a second before reassembling itself. Carolyn, he said, his voice concerned and gentle. What are you, Rachel? I said, cutting him off. I turned to my daughter, who stood frozen at the altar, her bouquet trembling. Tell them what you heard. Rachel looked at me, then at Blake, then slowly turned to face the crowd. Her wedding dress rustled in the afternoon breeze. Thursday night, she said, her voice shaking but clear. I went to Blake's hotel to surprise him. I heard him talking to Dominic through the door. Rachel, Blake started. I heard everything. She spoke louder now, her voice gaining strength. They were talking about drugging my mother, about making her seem incompetent so Blake could get power of attorney over her finances. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. I saw people leaning forward, some standing to hear better. He called her the old woman. Rachel continued, tears streaming down her face, but her voice steady. He said I was so stupid for not seeing what he was doing. He said once he had the power of attorney paperwork signed, it would be easy to, Rachel, sweetheart, you're panicking. Blake moved toward her, his voice dripping with concern. This is wedding anxiety. You're stressed. You misheard. I didn't mishear anything. Rachel stepped back from him. I heard you laughing about it. I heard you and Dominic planning to destroy my family for revenge against my father. Blake's mask cracked. For just a second, I saw the cold calculation beneath the charm. Then he turned to the crowd, hands spread in a gesture of helpless concern. I'm so sorry everyone is witnessing this, he said, his voice breaking perfectly. Rachel has been under so much stress planning the wedding. She hasn't been sleeping well. Sometimes anxiety can make us imagine things that aren't. Dr. Bennett, I called out, cutting through his performance. Dr. Laura Bennett stood from her seat in the front row. Every eye in the crowd shifted to her. Blake's face went pale. Yes, Carolyn, she said calmly. The trap was closing. You've stayed with Carolyn through weeks of investigation, a poisoning attempt, and now this wedding day confrontation. If you're still here, I want to hear from you. Comment below. Did you see the red flags from the beginning? Or did Brian almost fool you? Quick note before we go further, what comes next is a fictionalized courtroom-style showdown based on real elder abuse tactics. Some viewers find it intense. If that's not for you, this is a natural pause point. But if you want to see every piece of evidence laid out and justice finally served, stay right here. Dr. Bennett's voice cut through the murmurs like a scalpel. I'm Dr. Laura Bennett, she said, addressing the crowd with the calm authority of someone who delivered difficult news 1,000 times. I've been Carolyn's primary care physician for 8 years, and I need to set the record straight. She turned to face Blake directly. Carolyn Caldwell is completely lucid. She's sharper than people half her age. She manages a complex estate, maintains this property, and has never shown any signs of cognitive decline. Her voice hardened. So when Blake came to my office 5 weeks ago claiming she had memory problems, I knew he was lying. The crowd's murmurs rose. Blake's jaw tightened. He made an appointment under the pretense of being a concerned family member, Dr. Bennett continued. He asked very specific questions. What medications impair judgment? How do you obtain Ambien? What's the legal process for establishing conservatorship over someone deemed mentally incompetent? I was just concerned for her, Blake started. Those aren't the questions of a concerned family member. Dr. Bennett cut him off. Those are the questions of someone researching how to incapacitate an elderly woman and take control of her assets. The words hung in the air like a verdict. I saw people in the crowd exchanging shocked glances, hands covering mouths. I stood. Blake Harrison isn't his real name, I said, my voice carrying across the lawn. 120 faces turned toward me. His real name is Brian Edward Whitmore. He's wanted in Nevada for investment fraud. He jumped bail 5 years ago and has been operating under false identities ever since. Blake's face had gone white. Dominic, standing beside him, looked like he wanted to run. His father owned Whitmore Construction. I continued. In 2008, his company competed with my husband Philip's for a major commercial project in Missoula. Philip won the bid. Whitmore Construction couldn't recover from the loss. They declared bankruptcy. I paused, letting the crowd absorb it. Brian's father died by suicide in 2010. He left a note blaming Philip for destroying his business and his life. Brian was 17 years old when his father died. I saw understanding dawn on faces in the crowd. This wasn't just fraud. It was revenge. Brian has been planning this for 14 years, I said. He changed his name legally in 2019. He's done this twice before. Targeted women from wealthy families gotten engaged, then disappeared after their families paid him to go away quietly. That's not, Blake tried. Jennifer Fletcher in Seattle, Nicole Bradford in Denver. I named them clearly, loudly. Both daughters of wealthy men. Both lost their mothers or had mothers who were incapacitated. Just like Rachel lost her father 3 years ago. Rachel stood beside me now, her hand finding mine. 2 weeks ago, I said, Brian invited himself to dinner at my home. When I left the room, he put 20 milligrams of Ambien into my water. We have video of him crushing the pill, stirring it into the glass, and then encouraging me to drink it. The crowd erupted. Gasps, exclamations, people standing to see better. 20 milligrams is double the standard dose. I continued over the noise. For someone my age, it could cause severe confusion, loss of consciousness, even hospitalization. If I had drunk it, if I had been alone, he could have documented my incompetence and petitioned for medical power of attorney. This is insane, Blake said, but his voice had lost its confidence. He looked at the crowd, trying to find sympathetic faces. She's making this up. She never wanted Rachel to marry me. This is Andrea, I called. Andrea stood from her seat near the front, holding the leather portfolio. She walked to the center aisle where everyone could see her. I'm Andrea, Mrs. Caldwell's estate attorney, she said. I have documentation of everything she just described. She opened the portfolio. Video footage of the drugging incident. Laboratory results confirming zolpidem Ambien in the water sample. Medical affidavits from Dr. Bennett. A complete background investigation showing Brian Whitmore's real identity, his criminal record in Nevada, and evidence linking him to the 2 previous cases Mrs. Caldwell mentioned. She held up a thick stack of papers, USB drives, printed photos. This isn't a family dispute, Andrea said. This is attempted elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. And we have 120 witnesses here today who've heard the truth. Blake's mask finally shattered. The charm, the concern, the perfect smile, all of it fell away, leaving something cold and calculating beneath. You can't prove any of this, he said, but his voice shook. We already have, I said quietly. Sheriff Thomas Bennett stood from his seat in the 3rd row. He was a tall man, and when he rose, people noticed. He pulled back his jacket just enough to show the badge clipped to his belt. Brian Edward Whitmore, he said, moving toward the altar with deliberate steps. You're under arrest. Sheriff Thomas Bennett's voice echoed across the suddenly silent lawn. Brian Edward Whitmore, he said, standing directly in front of Blake. You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and an outstanding warrant in Nevada. Blake's face twisted. The charm shattered like glass. You have no proof, he shouted. This old woman is insane. She's made all of this up. Deputy Daniel Ross moved in, smoothly pulling Blake's arms behind his back. The handcuffs clicked into place. You have the right to remain silent, the sheriff said. I suggest you use it. Dominic bolted. He made it 20 feet before Marcus stepped out from behind the tent, blocking his path. Deputy Ross was there a second later. They handcuffed him too. Both brothers were led away through the crowd of 120 witnesses past the flower arch, past the illusion of the perfect wedding they'd tried to steal. Blake was still shouting as they put him in the patrol car, but his voice faded as the doors closed. The crowd didn't know what to do. Some people came to hug us. Others whispered, already crafting the story they'd tell for years. Rachel collapsed into my arms, the white dress crumpling between us. "You knew," she sobbed. "You were protecting me, and you were protecting me," I whispered back. We were protecting each other. We sat on the porch steps as the sun set still in our wedding clothes. The mountains turned purple in the fading light. Rachel told me about Thursday night standing outside Blake's hotel room, hearing him laugh about drugging me, about how stupid she was, about the 2 days she'd spent in hell trying to decide if she should tell me. I told her about the weeks of investigation, about Andrea Marcus Dr. Bennett's warning, the video evidence. "I'm sorry," Rachel said. "I should have come to you immediately." "You were in shock," I said. "There's no right way to handle learning the person you love isn't who they claim to be." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I don't know if I'll ever trust anyone again." "You will," I promised. "It'll take time, but you will." 3 months later, in December, we sat in Philip's garden. Brian had been sentenced to 5 years in a Montana state prison. Dominic got 3. Jennifer Fletcher and Nicole Bradford had both testified their stories, adding weight to the pattern. Rachel had moved back to the ranch temporarily. She was seeing a therapist twice a week, working through the betrayal. She'd started taking long walks in the mountains again. Last week, she'd gone on a coffee date with a teacher from Whitefish. Cautious, but healing. I told her everything about the estate, the full $9.5 million, the trust Philip had set up to protect her inheritance, the patents, the investments, the careful planning. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she'd asked. "Because your father believed money changed people," I said. "He wanted you to build your own life first, to know who you were before you knew what you had." Now we sat on the new stone bench I'd added to the garden. The inscription read, "Philip Caldwell, builder of home." The garden was dormant for winter, but I could see the spring bulbs waiting under the snow, life preparing to return. "Do you think Brian's father was a bad person?" Rachel asked. "I think he was a person who lost everything and couldn't see past his own pain," I said. "And he passed that pain to his son instead of helping him heal." "Tragedy creating tragedy," Rachel said softly. "Yes. What's the point of having money if it just makes people want to hurt you?" "Money doesn't buy moments like this," I said, "but it buys the safety to protect them. That's the real value of wealth, not to show off, but to defend what matters. Your father understood that." Rachel leaned her head on my shoulder. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart." We sat there as the December afternoon faded, as the birds called across the meadow, as the first stars appeared. The ranch house glowed warm behind us, full of Philip's memories, his tools, his blueprints, his coffee mug still on the counter. He wasn't here, but he was everywhere. And we were safe. We'd protected what mattered most, not the money, not the land, each other. Looking back now, I see how close we came to losing everything, not just the money or the land, but each other. If I could go back and speak to that version of myself, standing in the kitchen counting Blake's questions about property lines, I'd say this: don't be like me and wait until you have proof to trust your instincts. I spent weeks gathering evidence when my gut knew the truth from day one. God gave us intuition for a reason, to protect the people we love before the danger becomes undeniable. The lesson I learned, the one I pray stays with you, is this: wealth isn't about the numbers in your account. It's about having the resources to defend your family when predators come calling. Philip understood that. He built our life quietly, not to impress neighbors, but to create a fortress of safety. Thank God he had the wisdom to set up those trusts, to think ahead, to protect Rachel, even after he was gone. These family drama stories aren't just entertainment, they're warnings. Grandma stories like mine happen every day. Elderly women targeted families, manipulated legacies stolen. The pattern Blake followed is textbook elder abuse. If you're watching family drama stories like this one and thinking of your own vulnerable loved one, don't wait like I did. Grandma stories teach us that age doesn't make us weak, it makes us targets, unless we're prepared. Family drama stories show us that love without boundaries invites exploitation. Grandma stories remind us to ask hard questions, verify identities, and protect assets legally before it's too late. Thank God Rachel found her courage to tell me what she'd heard. Thank God we had each other. If this story helped you recognize red flags or inspired you to protect someone you love, please share it. Subscribe for more true life lessons wrapped in storytelling. Final note. This content contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the core lessons about recognizing financial and emotional abuse are real. If this style isn't for you, that's okay. Please seek content that better fits your needs.